I do like, this is great because we're moving, like, I've been treating the color blocks in isolation, right? So it's kind of like relative to each other. And I think of that sort of akin to like studying the model and then studying the model in the environment, right? So there's like, there's drawing the figure and then there's actually putting that figure into like a space that makes sense. And in this kind of scenario, we're gonna just keep sort of expanding color outward so that it's less about trying to get that block or those two couple blocks together. And now it's like, okay, can I actually make this, can I make this arrangement feel as though there's air, right? Can I make the model feel like it's in the room? And sort of expanding our vision and our lens on what we're doing, I think then it becomes less differentiated. So if I was to just kind of squint at this scene and see it as a totality, a lot of the shadows in all of these blocks and the fabrics are actually a lot more like each other than they are not. So that lens of kind of going back to the notan starts to become stronger when it actually makes sense to put things in an environment and put a scene together. And that this blue shadow, this green shadow, that green shadow, that red shadow, even that orange shadow, they all do have kind of a gray undertone, a blue undertone, you know, like you can find some kind of comparable between all of them that then maybe gives you like sort of a baseline to start off with, where it's like my shadows are gonna kind of exist in this realm and I may lean them blue, I may lean them yellow, I may lean them red, etc. And then when we get into the actual light mass, that probably is where some of the separations start to generally occur again. So it gives us an opportunity to put color in our lights and then put linked color in our shadows. And that's, I know that was something that there was an instructor at the Pennsylvania Academy, her name's Renee Faust, and she's kind of like an old school Dutch style painter, sort of old Flemish realism. And her big thing, when I had moments when I was struggling with trying to figure out color within paintings, is the first thing she told me is, she goes, well, if you want color in your lights, dull your shadows. And if you want color in your shadows, dull your lights. So you kind of choose a place where chroma can really start to separate itself, and then you use the reverse within the light hierarchy to begin to link the scene back together again. Theoretically makes sense?
Yeah, theoretically.
All right, well, let's theoretically do it.
The other thing, we got to watch Camille Preswodik.
Oh, yeah.
And there was,
Yes.
Eric Rhodes came out and was joking that when he was taking lessons with her, they painted
All they did
blocks
was
for
paint
2
blocks.
years.
Yeah, it's a legit practice.
But her painting was unfreaking
Well,
believable.
I think I've mentioned this before. I do like the idea of either doing something kind of really regimented like this, or treating these blocks as stand-ins, right? This could be a Cezanne fruit arrangement that's a still life arranged with color. This could be an arrangement of ceramic ware. It can be an arrangement of Tupperware. It can be an arrangement of things that you have personal interest in your own life and your own painting, right? When you start to kind of remove the identity of things and take some of the concept out of work, you get into kind of the push-ups and go into the gym of painting. But you know, it's like, this would be, you know, it's, I think of exercises or approaches like this, where it's like, if I was to do this for 2 years, I know that I would get really good at color and really good at painting and pretty damn good at drawing. So in that same way, it's like, if I was gonna try and become a baker, and it's like, I don't get it, this guy is just making me make French loaves every day. You know, but it's like, odds are like that second year French loaf is like probably pretty darn good. And then if they were to say like, okay, now start making Kaisers, or start making, you know, it's like, oh, how do I do? Well, it's just like that, but then you change these elements. Oh, got it. Right. So in that same way, it's like that in-depth approach. This is one really direct way to get at color. This kind of approach and philosophy of a certain kind of still life.
Which I thought when she was painting, she didn't let any of her colors touch. She
Yeah, you
did
kind of
her
hover,
first-
yeah.
Underpainting,
Yeah. Nothing touched on her.
Well, when you
canvas.
think about this, it's like the mass of it is like relatively similar, and if I need to make this actual wood grain come through in this block, it's probably more helpful to actually have wet into wet, because it makes the transition softer and smoother. So it's like, even though you're making hard lines in places, you're making hard lines between values or colors that are very, very similar. Whereas like the actual difference between, say, the shadow side of this and then the corner, the literal turning, is probably more, that it's probably better described with an actual color, as opposed to trying to take the shadow and take the light and see if I can sort of like smush them together in the right kind of combination, right? That becomes a little bit more apparent when you start getting into, right, if we reintroduced something like that, right? When I squint at this, I can very simply describe the top face of this. I can very simply describe most of the turning, but not all of it. So there's some spots where maybe like a color is best described separate here, best described separate along the face. And then there's going to be some third color that is usually not just smushing them together. I think that's where we get caught up, is that we think that, you know, I gave that example. I do a black and white painting, I stain it with burnt sienna in a glaze fashion, and then I try and mix an area where it's just the white and the burnt sienna. So I know that I have white with a thin glaze of burnt sienna over an area of that painting.
Sorry.
That's fine. Right, I have white, like the underpainting is white, the glaze layer is burnt sienna, and it's created a color there where it's like, oh, well, if I just mix, it's not as dark as burnt sienna, it's not as light as white. If I just mix those two colors together, I'll get that color. And the answer to that is wrong. Like, they optically make a new color. And so we have to think of painting the turning in that fashion as well. That there's an area in here where a third mixture is actually going to be helpful to create the illusion of the turn. And that will look more blended than actually blending it. And then there's an area right along the rim here where that's a similar fashion, where it's like that could be a color that describes a lip up, or it could be a series of different colors that, you know, that can be put together as big or small of mosaic pieces as you can, you know, desire, right? But it gets into the world of like, it gets into the world of being able to look at something like this and distill it into a translation on your palette that makes sense. And so when we get into this world where everything is starting to kind of, the cone of vision is expanding, then making things simpler, making things more like each other for as long as you can, in as big a shape as you can, actually is a stronger place to be when it comes to color. And that feels counterintuitive because we see red block, yellow block, blue block, etc. But the reality is that we can actually make them a lot more like each other, and it will feel more real because it's through the lens of the mixing. Any add-ons to that? You like it? All right, let's do it.